He leaned back like he was still in our parents' kitchen, feet flat, arms crossed, grinning like he owned the air between us. His voice cut through the pre-briefing hum like a blade. "Careful, Emery," he said loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Wouldn't want all your top-secret charts to trip up the real soldiers." A few heads turned. One officer coughed into his hand. Another shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I didn't respond. I didn't look at him. I looked at the badge on his chest. It didn't have a clearance stripe, just a barcode and his name. That was all I needed to see. My name is Emery Locke. I'm a major in Army intelligence. I've spent the last 9 years earning clearances, designing counter-infiltration systems, briefing joint task forces on signals warfare and national threat vectors. I've been called quiet, methodical, overly serious, but never reckless. And in that room, I was the senior officer responsible if even a single word of classified data walked out with someone who didn't belong. He wasn't supposed to be there, so I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I didn't give him the power of reaction. I flagged his badge with one silent nod. Let the system work. They said I humiliated my brother in front of generals, that I cost him his deployment. But that day I wasn't acting as his sister. I was acting as the officer in charge, and I did what had to be done. The lights were dim, the kind they always kept low for satellite projections. The air inside the skiff felt colder than usual, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones, but couldn't quite mask the tension riding the room. 24 chairs arranged in tight rows facing a single screen, and a Joint Command emblem mounted on the steel-paneled wall. Every person in that room had clearance except for one. Shane sat in the third row, arms crossed back, slightly slouched, like he was settling in for entertainment rather than a classified briefing. He wasn't in uniform, no ribbons, no rank, just a base visitor's tag pinned to his chest, no embedded chip, no red stripe, and still somehow here he was, like this was a family barbecue, and I was overreacting for locking the liquor cabinet. He smiled at me again. The same smirk I'd seen since we were kids, and he'd let me take the fall for things he thought were funny. His foot bounced lazily under the table. I ignored it. Instead, I locked eyes with Sergeant Malone near the tech terminal. I gave one tilt of my chin. She blinked, then nodded, subtle and exact. Her fingers tapped a sequence on the tablet, and she slipped out the side door without a word. I clicked forward to slide 3 a high-altitude thermal capture of relay nodes along the southern corridor. My voice was steady, practiced, professional. These are the routing intersections tied to the spoofed data packets. We believe the signature was manipulated to imitate Fort Everett's internal relay. Someone near the back adjusted their chair. A soft scrape of metal. No one interrupted me. Not this time. Exactly 2 minutes later, the door hissed open. The military police didn't rush. They walked in with the kind of calm authority that said they weren't confused about why they were here. No one had to ask. The air shifted before a single word was spoken. Shane turned his head, slowly confused at first, then amused. "Whoa, easy fellas," he said, hands up like he was about to deliver a punchline. "Didn't realize I needed a golden ticket." No one laughed. One MP stepped forward. "Sir, you're not cleared for this room. You'll need to come with us." I didn't move. I didn't blink. I let the silence hold. Shane looked at me just for a moment. His smile faltered. He stood slow, almost rehearsed, and let himself be guided to the door. "Guess I missed the popcorn," he muttered, his voice trailing off. The door shut behind him with a quiet finality. I turned back to the screen and clicked the next slide. As you can see, the breach aligns with known pressure points on our Tier 2 data corridors. This was no accident, and I kept going precise, unfazed, because the moment I let emotion crack through, I'd lose more than composure. I'd lose command. We grew up in a town where people still mowed their own lawns in boots and called every enlisted man sir out of habit, even if they were just bagging groceries at the PX. Our father, Thomas Locke, served 23 years in Navy logistics. He never talked much, but when he did, his voice came in clipped commands and worn metaphors. "Measure twice, speak once," or "loud don't mean right." But he always made an exception for Shane. Shane was the kind of boy who turned every hallway into a playing field. He could throw a perfect spiral across the backyard by age 7, and our father beamed like he'd just watched a legend being made. They shared a language of shoulder slaps, half-said jokes, stories whispered over barbecue smoke. Shane didn't just fill a room, he absorbed it. Me? I was quiet. Kept my hands busy, my head down. I liked puzzles. I liked patterns. I liked silence. By the time I was 12, I had a box under my bed labeled Unsolved, filled with cipher exercises and logic grids cut from library books. I brought home straight A's. I memorized Latin roots for fun. I earned medals for regional math competitions. But no one grilled ribs when I came home. No one framed my ribbons. Once I overheard Dad tell a neighbor, "She's a smart one. Low maintenance." He said it like a compliment. It didn't feel like one. Shane got into fights at school and walked out with praise for not taking crap from anyone. I got suspended once for correcting a teacher's math on the board too confidently. When I came home crying, Mom said, "Maybe next time say it nicer." The gap wasn't always cruel, just constant. A slow, quiet stacking of difference. And I told myself it didn't matter, that if I just kept performing, kept achieving, kept disappearing into results, maybe one day the balance would shift, but it never did. When Shane enlisted, the entire street threw a cookout. Dad said, "That's my boy," at least 6 times before the stakes were even flipped. Shane hadn't even graduated basic, and they were already calling him a hero. The same summer, I was accepted into the National Defense Scholars Program at Lockridge University. I printed the letter and taped it to the fridge. The next morning it was gone. No one said anything, not even a nod. So I stopped sharing. I folded up my achievements, stacked them in folders, tucked them in drawers. And Shane. He continued to blaze forward, loud, certain, always assumed to be capable, even when he wasn't. Years later, when I earned my commission, I mailed the announcements myself. No one came to the pinning. Dad said airfare was steep. Mom said you probably want it quiet anyway. And I told myself I did. But some silences don't feel like peace. They feel like absence sharpened. When I look back on how I got here, I don't remember a single moment that felt like a breakthrough. Just small, brutal increments. Late nights under flickering fluorescence. Polygraphs that left me dry-mouthed. Background checks that stretched for months and peeled back years of my life, contact by contact, conversation by conversation. They even interviewed my freshman roommate. She called me in a panic. "Are you in trouble?" she whispered. I wasn't, but I understood why she thought I might be. Clearance isn't a privilege. It's a process of erosion. You give up your privacy, your spontaneity, your ability to explain anything in plain words, and when you finally get through, when the badge comes back, TSCI, it doesn't feel like arrival. It feels like isolation, sharp and complete. I was 29 when I got posted to Fort Mason, assigned to a cross-agency cyber intelligence initiative. My official title was Senior Vector Analyst, but what I did was far less elegant. I mapped false flag signal operations, chased deep spoofing events, and rerouted intrusions no one outside the room even knew existed. We weren't the ones who made headlines. We were the reason those headlines didn't happen. I shared an office with 2 other analysts. We didn't speak much, just passed notes in encrypted tabs, and nodded when someone found something that mattered. I got used to the quiet. I even found peace in it. Outside the wire, though, that peace didn't translate. Family never asked what I did not, because they respected the silence, but because they didn't think it was real. At Thanksgiving, Shane would raise his glass and say, "Here's to the ones actually keeping us safe," and everyone would laugh. Clink glasses. Look at me like I should loosen up. I'd smile. That tight professional smile you learn to wear so you don't break in public. He once sent me a photo of himself in full gear, leaning on a Humvee. The caption read, "Meanwhile, in the real army." I didn't respond. He liked the version of me that was harmless. The one who sat quietly in the corner, who double-checked lists, who didn't need applause or take up space. The one he could joke about and still call family. And the worst part, I let him. For a long time, I told myself it was easier. That if I just kept my head down, and kept producing results one day, someone would see me. But the thing about being invisible is that it becomes habit. You stop asking to be seen. You just hope no one steps on you when they cross the room. So I worked, and when I made major, I sent myself a bottle of champagne. No card, no toast. Just me and a quiet click of the glass on my desk. Because silence by then had become the only voice I trusted. It was a Thursday when the bulletin hit my inbox. Just another logistics update from Central Command, the kind we all skimmed between encryption cycles. I opened it. Half-distracted coffee gone lukewarm beside me. Eyes scanning down the list of new unit attachments and rotation overrides. I almost missed it. Line 42. Staff Sergeant Shane Locke. Logistics Liaison Observation Support, Temporary Assignment. Fort Mason, JTC Integration Phase 2. My throat tightened before my mind caught up. He wasn't joining my unit, not officially, but he'd be on base. In the building, assigned as a liaison for the same operational structure I worked inside every day. It wasn't a direct overlap, but it was close enough to feel like a fuse had just been lit in the hallway outside my office. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then I leaned back and listened. Nothing but the hum of the HVAC and the slow tick of the analog clock someone had nailed above the comms board. Time kept moving. My breath didn't. There are rules in this job, layers of them. Barriers, codes, clearances, but there's nothing in any of them about how to handle family that doesn't recognize the boundary between casual and classified. Shane had always treated my work like a punchline. Clipboard soldier, PowerPoint general, Intel Barbie. I could already hear him walking in, tossing out jokes, smirking through acronyms he didn't understand, charming the junior staff like he belonged. Except he didn't. I closed the laptop and sat still for a long time. I didn't make a call. I didn't draft a memo. I just let the realization settle like dust in my lungs. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. Shane wasn't dangerous in the way intelligence briefs define it. But there are other ways people become threats. Casual disrespect, boundary pushing, the kind of behavior that seems harmless until someone laughs at the wrong moment and a line gets crossed. He wouldn't mean to hurt the mission, but he wouldn't take it seriously either. And that was its own kind of hazard. Later that night, I went home and sat on my porch with a legal pad I never wrote on, just holding the pen, staring into the dark. I thought about calling my CO. I thought about flagging it early. But then I imagined the conversation. "Ma'am, are you saying your brother is a risk?" And what would I say to that? I didn't know. Not yet. But I felt the tension coiling in my gut like it had a name. And it did. The day he walked in, I already knew. I'd seen his name on the rotation logs 2 days earlier and had kept hoping someone else would catch it, flag it, correct it, reroute it. No one had. So there he was, third row, civilian dress, elbows wide like he owned the air around him. He didn't look nervous. Of course he didn't. I stepped up to the front of the room, laser pointer in one hand, tablet synced to the projection screen behind me. The skiff wasn't large bare metal walls. 22 chairs, 3 liaisons from interagency groups, and 2 generals from Strategic Cyber Command. Everyone wore their clearance tags, everyone but him. Shane didn't even try to blend in. He leaned back in his chair like he was waiting for someone to bring him popcorn. He caught my eye and grinned. "Hope this isn't just slides and acronyms, M," he said loud enough to draw attention. "I skipped lunch for this." I didn't answer. I didn't look again. I just tilted my chin slightly toward Chief Warrant Holt, seated at the back terminal. She understood immediately. One blink, one tap on her screen, one message sent. I continued voice level. "We're tracking an origin shift across Tier 2 nodes in the central corridor. Indicators suggest a piggyback technique imitating Fort Everett's relay cadence." No one spoke. No one questioned the presence of the man in row 3. But they noticed. I saw it in the flick of a colonel's eyes, the tightened jaw of a DIA analyst. They were reading the room, calculating, waiting. 3 minutes in, the door opened. 2 MPs stepped in crisp uniforms, no hesitation. They moved as one, walking the aisle with precision. Shane turned, blinked like someone had turned on the lights mid-movie. Then he smiled again. "Gentlemen," he said, raising his hands mockingly. "Guess I missed the clearance memo." No one laughed. Sir, one MP said, firm and formal. "You are not cleared for this environment. You'll need to exit the room immediately." He glanced at me. That's when it shifted. The smirk cracked. Not fully, but enough. For just a breath I saw it. Not confusion, not defiance. Something closer to disbelief. Like he'd just realized I hadn't come to play along. He stood slowly, straightening his sleeves like it was all a joke he'd agree to wrap up early. As they walked him to the door, he muttered, "Guess the nerds win today." Then the door closed, and the silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was order reestablished. I clicked to the next slide without missing a beat. As you can see, the breach overlaps 2 critical pressure points. If left unchecked, it compromises relay redundancy in both directions. No one interrupted, no one questioned, and no one not even once spoke his name again. The briefing ended the way most of them do: quiet nods, firm handshakes, a few murmured remarks about rerouting protocols and action item deadlines. The generals left first, followed by the civilian liaisons. I stayed behind to power down the terminal file, the incident report already waiting for my signature on the tablet. Chief Holt didn't say anything. She just handed me the stylus, nodded once, and walked out. No drama, no commentary. But by the time I got back to my quarters that evening, my phone had started humming. First came the text from my mother. "Couldn't you have handled that privately?" No greeting. No question about my day, just that. Cold, accusatory. Like I'd taken a swing at Shane in the middle of church, instead of protecting a skiff from an unauthorized presence. I didn't reply. 2 hours later, she called. I didn't pick up. Her voicemail came with that quiver she used when she wanted to sound maternal, but hurt. "Tess, I just think maybe you didn't realize how humiliating that must have been for your brother. In front of all those people. Maybe you could have just talked to him first." As if talking would have made a clearance badge materialize out of thin air. As if she didn't understand, or worse, didn't care what that room represented. Dad didn't call. He never does when things get messy. But 2 days later, my cousin emailed me a forward from a family group chat. A message from my father had been quoted clipped clean. She overreacted. "You don't shame your own in front of outsiders." Outsiders. That's what he called the colonels, the analysts, the very people I'd worked beside for years. People who'd trained with me, covered for me, trusted me. To him, they were strangers, disposable. What mattered was the name we shared, not the rules we served. Then Shane posted something online. It wasn't direct. It didn't have to be. Funny how some folks forget where they come from once they get a little brass on their chest. Good luck briefing your conscience. 68 likes, 4 comments, old friends, high school buddies, all the usual cheerleaders. I didn't respond. I didn't screenshot. I didn't even flinch. But something in me cooled. Because what struck me wasn't the jab, it was how quickly people took sides, and how silent my family stayed. No one asked what happened in the room. No one cared that he wasn't cleared, that I was responsible for what left that skiff. But my inbox quietly, steadily, it filled. From colleagues, from officers I barely knew, from a lieutenant who'd once seen me recode a mapping error in 5 minutes under pressure. "You handled it with grace, Major. Wish I had your calm." That was textbook command. They didn't know the whole story, but they knew enough. And for the first time I started to wonder, maybe I'd been looking for respect in the wrong direction all along. The call came just after dusk. I was sitting in my car engine, off one hand, still resting on the keys, watching the shadows stretch across the parking lot outside the commissary. His name lit up my screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Hey," Shane said. His voice was low, steady. They pulled me off the deployment list. I didn't say anything, just waited. They didn't spell it out, but I know why. They called it a disciplinary ambiguity. Whatever the hell that's supposed to mean. There was a pause, then a single dry laugh. "I don't blame you. Not anymore." I leaned back in my seat, the takeout bag untouched beside me. "I didn't think you'd go through with it," he said. "Thought you'd let it slide. You know, family and all. I didn't report you." I said calm. "You weren't cleared." I did what the job required. That room wasn't for anyone without credentials. He exhaled long and quiet. I didn't know it was that strict. I mean, I knew I wasn't on the list, but I thought being stationed on base meant I could observe. "I figured you'd cover for me." "There's no covering for a skiff," I said, "especially not that briefing." He didn't argue. That alone told me something had shifted. "I've been thinking about it," he said after a while. "How I walked in like it was a joke, like none of it mattered. And you didn't even flinch. Just looked at me like you'd already let go of the whole game." I didn't deny it. "I guess I wasn't ready," he admitted. "Wasn't ready for you to be the one giving orders." "You don't have to be," I said, "but you have to respect it." "I do," he replied. "Now I do." He told me they were moving him to a stateside logistics post. No deployment, no operations, just paperwork and schedule sheets. He didn't sound bitter, just quiet. Before we hung up, he said, "You didn't try to make me look bad. You just handled it. No scene, No speech. Just did what needed to be done. That's the job. Yeah, he said. It is. He paused again. Next time you're back in town, drinks on me. I mean that. No skiff talk. Deal. When the call ended, I sat there for a moment, phone in my lap, breath slow. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel sorry. I felt something release. Not him. Me.